A few years ago, I joined a sci-fi fantasy book club local to the area, and we got together every other Sunday and we talked about sci-fi, fantasy. We read a book, obviously, but like every second Sunday was an open-ended discussion where we just kind of talked about whatever, and we had a lot of interesting conversations about science fiction, about fantasy, about movies, television, books, obviously, etc., etc. And one of the guys there was well known for having lecture-length opinions on certain topics, and one of the ones that sticks in my mind the most was his lecture on time travel and how time travel fiction is impossible to pull off. A lot of his opinion comes from a lot of like minute details that authors genuinely tend to forget when writing time travel fiction. Like, you're not gonna beam here from 2020 to the Middle Ages. You're not gonna make that trip wearing the clothing you have, talking the way you talk, and expect all the locals to be all like, I say, this here individual, he must beeth from outside the kingdom of sorts, pray tell. You also gotta take into account the butterfly effect and just how devastating it can be. You know, they say you squash a butterfly in the Middle Ages and then you come back and find out something outrageous like Kanye West running for president. I mean, oh man, could you imagine something that outrageous? Thank God we live in reality where something like that would never happen. So when I got to this week's audio drama, Continuum Force, I'll admit one of the first things that came to mind was that guy's lecture on time travel fiction, and I'm not gonna say that the man was 100% right about everything and the man was the most glorious of geniuses, wah! But he did make a lot of valid points. And I'll admit that was one of the things I kind of looked for in this was, how well do they do this? Do they actually put the effort in, or do they just kind of travel back in time and like, yo, sup bitches, we from the 21st century, y'all. I weirdly adopt that accent knowing full well none of them are black, but I'm canceled, aren't I? Anyway, the plot of the Continuum Force is that Continuum Force is the new military branch, newer than Space Force even. They have all this time travel tech that throughout the first couple of episodes they're just still trying to figure out for the most part. And it's up to them to use this technology to make sure that other people who have their own time travel tech through however they obtained it don't abuse the power and go back in time and try to change things for the better, question mark? There are certain time travel anomalies that apparently don't register, like if a guy goes back 1 week in time and picks the winning lottery numbers once and then never does it again, or like the absolute biggest of that kind of phenomenon was somebody replacing Houdini's rhino with an elephant. Yeah, they changed history, but in the grand scheme of things, the change did nothing to the timeline at all, so it's like, well, okay, I guess we could overlook it. But then you get to big things like, you know, the JFK assassination, or the Roman Empire, or Apollo 13, and that's when Continuum Force has to step in and they have to change things back to the way it was, to the best of their ability. There are some things that are obviously overlooked, like are they wearing period-appropriate clothing when they go back in time, because it's an audio drama, and I just assume that they do all the stuff where they either put on the right clothes or they just stay out of sight and out of mind and try to fix things from a distance. There's a lot of sci-fi techno-babble in here, and I'm not even going to attempt to explain how it works or if any of it's actually correct. But I will say that in terms of entertainment value, this is actually a really good audio drama. It is billed as a bit of a comedy, but a lot of the comedy comes from, like, a lot of the guys arguing with each other and exchanging clever one-liners a la Archer, except time traveling instead of espionage, obviously, and no hint of H. John Benjamin in sight, but that's beside the point. Not going to lie, not everybody in this show is a good actor. Particularly the guy who plays Eli was the guy who kind of stood out the most to me. I would pull up the senator from South Carolina, but he was honestly in one episode so far, and, you know, if it's one episode, if it's a bit part, I can forget about it pretty effortlessly. But when it's one of the main cast, like Eli, I notice it, and Eli, God bless him for trying, but he sounds like Patton Oswalt reading from a cue card, and I mean like just reading from a cue card. And it's one thing if you're like dumping exposition, like you're explaining how the time machine works, and it's another thing when you're having an argument with your wife about whether or not this is where the dump is going to happen. No, this is where the dump is going to happen. No, this is where the dump's going to happen. You know, it's just, you know, I kind of notice it, and I don't want to say it bugs me, but I'm definitely aware of it. The comedy overall isn't really laugh out loud hilarious, but I did get a couple of chuckles from a couple of one-liners, particularly from Buzz, the grizzled NASA space astronaut turned Continuum Force operative. That guy does get all the clever one-liners in the show, and some of them are great, some of them not so great, etc. Though it's not the funniest comedy I've ever heard in my entire life, the story overall is a lot more interesting because they actually go into how time and space has changed whenever somebody meddles with the timeline. And it's always interesting to see what happens when things happen, like, for example, if Kennedy didn't get assassinated, would he have gotten reelected? Would he have been good in the fight against the communists, etc., etc.? That's always kind of like really interesting stuff to me, and it's the reason I check out a lot of novels like The United States of Asgard or any given Harry Turtledove novel, at least on premise. Whether or not the execution is always good is always up for debate, but I digress. They don't go too deep into a dive into how things changed, but they do talk about how things changed, and whether or not these changes are accurate is always a popular topic of debate, and I really find this to be a fascinating thing. Like, if Kennedy survived the assassination, would the United States still be the superpower it is now? It's stuff like that, you know? It's the kind of stuff that fascinates me. At the time I'm recording this, I haven't finished the audio drama just yet. There's like 20 episodes as of this recording. But if I'm being entirely honest, I see myself finishing this audio drama. And I see myself following it from this point onward if they decide to upload more episodes. This is a really good show. I really like a lot of it, and I'm willing to forgive a few subpar performances. I'm just going to come out and say it, man. 4 hats out of 4. And that's going to do it for this week's audio drama. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell to show you actually mean it, and stay tuned for more Tommy Tealhack goodness. Until next time.